Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here on time. We are holding towards the end of chapter 36 in Tanya, and we hope today to conclude chapter 36. The main theme of this chapter is three. Number one, I shared with you the three things over and over, and I think it's important just to refresh our mind. Why God created this universe? Number two, what does it mean getting closer or farther from God? And number three is why God created the spiritual worlds if He did not give them the Torah and they do not need to overcome any challenges to serve God. We went over and over. What we discussed is that closer or farther from God is not from God's perspective. God is everywhere and God is everything. Closer to God, sensing God, farther from God, less sensing of God, more covering. So if I am here and the window has no curtain, I benefit from the sun much more than someone who puts a curtain. If someone puts two curtains or three curtains, the distance from the sun is farther. Are they physically removed from God, from the sun, more than the one in the next room without a curtain? No. But because of those coverings, they are considered less connected or benefiting or impacted by the sun. The rabbi began by saying, and some of it is a repeat, but that will help us get into the next point. The rabbi began by saying that the real purpose of God's creation of the universe are known two reasons, as I said before. One, God is a kind creator, God who is kind, and kindness only works with another person. Kind to myself, I say I'm very kind to myself, is incorrect. You cannot be kind to yourself. Kindness desires somebody else. That's why Abraham was looking for guests all the time, even though he wasn't well. The second reason is God wanted to be known, and therefore He created the universe. The Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe in this chapter at the beginning, gave us a third reason. The third reason are three words that in the statement of the Midrash Rabbah of the Midrash, Nitaveh, the God desire to have a universe. No, you don't ask a question and a desire, a lust, a desire. That's his desire. That's what he wants. If you're asking me, why do I want to live in town? That's the way I want it. There is no reason. I don't have to come up. It's something that tickles me, makes me happy. People fall in love, people hate something, and they cannot always explain. The next one is God wanted to have a dira. Dira is a dwelling place, a home. We explained in length the difference between workplace, vacation, a cruise, hotel room, at my mother's home or my mother-in-law's home versus my own home. In my own home, it may be a very simple abode, but the expression of the person is completely different than any other place. God wanted to have his own abode here. And the third word is betachtonim. Betachtonim means in the lowest nether world, which is this universe. Therefore, he created all the previous worlds for this universe, so that the other worlds are kind of curtains that distance this universe from God. This is what we studied thus far. The Rebbe goes on to explain, and I was stumbled by a question that somebody asked me. I think it was Harry, and I appreciate it because it made me research. The rabbi goes on to say that therefore the greatest revelation of godliness is in this universe. Because after all, how do I know if I'm in a project of building a house? So I hire architects and I apply for permits and I pay the fees, and then I buy a piece of land, and then I have the tractors flattening the land, and then I have masonry, foundation, then walls, then plumbing, then electricity, and then the drywall, and then the windows and the doors, and finally we painted, and the house is ready for CO, for a certificate of occupancy, and I'm moving in. That's when I stop working on the project. When do I stop working on a project? when my desire from the outset is accomplished. If it's not yet accomplished, I'll keep working. That's why the book of creation that created by Abraham or by Adam tells us that we say it in Friday night because it relates to Friday night. In a moment I'll explain. Sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. The last action, the last part of the project was the first thought that came to my mind. So when God created the 6 days of creation, what did he actually wanted with the creation? Creation of Adam and Eve. That's why they are the last. After creating Adam and Eve, it says that the world came into completion. God saw everything he created, it was good. Why is that? Because if God would have created Adam on the third day, it would be enough and he wouldn't continue on. Therefore, he prepared everything before he completes the creation. So, every Friday night in Lecha Dodi, it says, Sof Maaseh b'machshava tchila. The end of the action, the completion, the last part of the action is the first thought that enters my mind. Is that clear? Here an example. If I call you and I have an agenda, I start what we call small talk. And then if I'm an Israelis, they would say, cut to the chase, right? What happens if I tell you I need you to sponsor a new building? After you say yes or no, that's the end of the conversation. In other words, once I have shared my real reason for the call, there is no need to socialize and continue the conversation. It ends at that point. Everything happens before, so to say, to level the ground, to prepare the ground. And so once I warm you up and I feel that you are comfortable with me asking, that's the way it's in my particular profession. I am sure that the same applies in the medicine. Is that true? No?
No necessarily.
Yeah. Jim, what do you say? He's an emergency room doctor.
I agree.
You agree? You start small talk?
Time.
Huh?
I don't have time.
You don't have time for
10
that.
seconds.
You get to the bottom and that's it.
Why are you here? When did it start?
Okay. But, so I'm going back to my example. You start with small talk, and once you get to the bottom line, the reason for the call, once you have had the conversation, either you succeeded or not, but that's how where it ends. There is no more stuff coming up. So when God created universes, the last one is really the real reason he created it. So where you want to find God, if someone searching, an angel is searching for God, he comes here. A human, any creature wants to find God, they can find it here. How do we find God? By obeying God's commandments. Every time I do God's commandments, I reveal part of the curtain and open up to connect to God. We studied the Torah. Last week, we discovered that the Torah is the protective gear that protects us from getting totally nullified. This is so far what we've studied. What I want to add, and that would be an answer to what I was asked. At this point today, we are in exile. You know what exile means? God left his home. He left the house. He's separated from his spouse. We are God's spouse, and he was very angry for we did not follow, we did not behave, and God has left the house. And therefore, finding God is not achieved so easily. Connecting to God is not achieved in a way that we can feel it. As long as we are in exile, we are removed from God. However, the ultimate goal is to bring God back. Once God comes back into the universe, it is the time of Mashiach. And we read, as the rabbi is going to give us many verses in the Bible, that it talks about the revelation of godliness in a way where we can witness the relationship that no other creature in other worlds can achieve. So at this point in time, for my neshama, this body is confinement, is jail, because the body is pulling away from God, And for the neshama to connect to God, it's a fight, it's a war. It's very difficult. What happens on Friday night in Shabbat? An extra soul enters the body, makes it a lot easier for the body to obey God. But it's still not the level that God desired at the beginning of the creation. That explains a lot of questions, and I'm going to address several questions that are being answered. The first question is, Mashiach, the redemption. Before, let me just add one more thing. There is a debate. What is the ultimate of reward for people who serve God? Rambam, Maimonides, says that the ultimate reward is the up in heaven to the souls. But it's impossible, because it's impossible for God to reward us in a physical universe. In other words, according to the Rambam, Maimonides, the resurrection from the dead is only temporarily, and the souls will return back. All of the Kabbalists, without an exception, disagree with them, and the ruling is follow the Kabbalists based on certain concepts in rules in Torah. The Nachmanides, notably, is very up against Rambam. Nachmanides says that the body is the one who sweat and suffered to serve God, and it's not fair not to reward the body. Therefore, the resurrection from the dead would be the soul returning back to its body, and then together they will receive the reward. That explains Isaiah speaks about the world to come, the resurrection, that there will be a lion with a child and a snake with a little baby, and a goat, a kid, will be playing with a lion. Rambam says it's a metaphor. It's not for real. It's not physically real. All the Kabbalists disagree, and they say that's the physical universe where all of the nature will stay, except God will be revealed. So therefore, there will be no animosity. There will be no war, no jealousy, and animals will be here to serve the human and not to hurt human, and therefore a human being will be there to protect the animals and not to fight and hurt and be cruel to animals. Based on that the resurrection of the dead must come back into this universe, all the Kabbalists follow it, and therefore someone who died at the age of 97, they will return back with a fresh new body when they were 18 or 16. I think I shared with you before. They all will come back based on the service of God they perform. That's how their connection to God will be achieved in the world to come. That explains, based on what I shared, that explains why the resurrection of the dead and the world to come is so essential in Jewish life. So essential that in the Amidah prayer, there are a total of 7 blessings dedicated to redemption and the resurrection. Plus, we conclude the prayer, Sheibane Beit HaMikdash, let God rebuild the temple. In other words, in the Amidah prayer, we have 19 blessings. 7 is a third, are all about, and they are, the first one is Mechaya Meitim, Goel Israel, מקבץ נדחי עמו ישראל, השיבה שופטינו ולירושלים, את צמח דוד ותחזנה, and then we conclude, שיבנה בית המקדש, may God rebuild the temple. So every day, in three prayers, 3 Amidah prayers that you recite during the day, you ask for a complete blessing 24 times for God to return back Mashiach and resurrect the dead. It is not just another mitzvah. It is not just another part of the plan. It is the ultimate goal. Remember when I told you that Sof Ma'aseh B'machshavat Tchila, when God had a plan, once he reached the goal, he stopped creating. That's why when Adam was created, that's it. The creation has not come yet to a completion until God will return back everybody and make the universe a perfect universe. It will affect, as the Alter Rebbe is going to talk, even the non-Jews. The non-Jewish nations will also turn back to God and be impacted by the Jewish people, as we'll see verses in the Tanakh, in the Bible, relate to it. But all I care to say is that that's why it makes it so essential. And so we have 13 principles of faith. Rambam lists 13 principles by which every Jew must believe in, and without which the person is not following Jewish tradition. Two of them are dedicated to the Mashiach and the resurrection of the dead. So it's not just one, it's two, because the ultimate goal, everything we do now, is to get us to that point of perfection. However, the only way to get there is overcoming challenges. So if God reveals himself the way he's going to reveal himself at the time of Mashiach, then we will not get there. And let me use an example, a story. Ali, are you able to follow? Huh? There was a tailor, a Jewish tailor, whom the king of that country loved his craftsmen. And he loved ordering garments by the tailor.
Okay.
Other tailors were jealous that this Jewish tailor gets all the jobs. So they decided to do something about that. They turned to the king and they said to the king that the tailor is a thief. You give him material, the highest quality material, and not all of it is used to sew and create your garments. Some of it he pockets. So the king decided to test the tailor. He took a square piece of material. He summoned the tailor. He turned to the tailor and he says to him, from this, I would like you to create for me a jacket. Are you able to? The tailor looked at it and said, sure, I can do it. 2 weeks later go by and the tailor shows up with a jacket. Beautiful jacket, fits very well. But the king suspected that part of the material were not used. So he turned to the tailor and he says to him, you're a thief. I caught you. You stole part of the material. And the tailor said to him, why do you think so? And the king says to him, because the jacket should not take so much material as much as I gave you. Where is the extra? And the tailor says, you know, there is only one way to prove you wrong. Get me a pair of scissors. He took a pair of scissors and he opened up and undid all the parts of the jacket, sleeves, liner, and all. And then he was able to put the pieces like a piece of puzzle and recreated the exact square that the king had given him. And the king turns to him and says, well, you proved me wrong. I am sorry. And the tailor says to him, yeah, but there is one thing you have lost. You lost your jacket. I won't be able to put it back. That's the cost of proving me honest. There are times where it's a catch-22. The tailor can prove the king that he did not steal any part, but by doing so, he will dismantle the jacket and he won't be able to put the jacket back. If God were to reveal the real purpose of the universe, that's like the jacket, you cannot undo it. Then we will not be able to come close to God because we didn't show that we are yearning to connect to God. Therefore, God is hiding himself and we are searching for God and connecting to God through the mitzvot. That's the benefit of the extra soul on Shabbat. Somebody asked me on Shabbat and Yom Kippur, it assists the body, but right now it's all hidden. Because if it would be revealed, there would be no ultimate goal achieved. And as long as that goal did not reach that point, we didn't do enough. We're not there yet. That explains the Rebbe is going to, what I'm sharing with you is a summary, a synopsis of what we're going to study. That explains, says the Rebbe, and I'm going to show you an example. Some people, before they buy a house, or a builder that wants to sell homes, they have model homes, right? When I came to America, the first time I saw model homes here in Florida, and I was amazed, because to me it was a total waste. But I learned that they are selling it afterwards at a discounted price, so no one loses anything. But what is a model home? A potential buyer can walk through, they cannot move into the house. He wants them to build, to contract them to build them a home. So they look through the model, they see the rooms, they see the material, they see the quality, and this way either they like it or they make changes, and that's how he attracts and closes the deal. Is that what a model home? Is there any other purpose for a model home? No other purpose. Says the Rebbe, God had created a model home for Mashiach time. He had allowed us to walk through a dwelling that is exactly Mashiach's days and time. When did it happen? The giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. At the giving of the Torah, that's why there is no repeat. Soon I'm going to show it you how many questions it addresses. That's why God came from all corners, and the people we are talking about great miracles. They saw that which you hear, and they heard that which you see. I'm sure you heard that, no? Huh? In addition, God spoke one word, and all the Ten Commandments were heard from one word. But most importantly, in the Ten Commandments, we have the entire Torah included. That's why how many letters are in the Ten Commandments? 620. That includes 613 commandments plus the 7 rabbinic laws that King Solomon added. So you have 320 commandments. Each letter corresponds. There is a book by a rabbi called Rasag. Rabbi Saadia Gaon died at a very young age, being persecuted by the authorities, non-Jewish authorities. But he put together the list of 613 commandments. He's one of the earliest. He also has a book where he find every one of the 613 commandments in the 10 commandments. In other words, minus the 10 commandments, 603, all in the 10 commandments, because it's the whole Torah. It is a model. It is. That's why we say people who convert to Judaism, have converted, will convert, their souls were at Mount Sinai. Why? Because God wants to sell us on the ultimate day of Mashiach. He wants us to walk through a model home. That's why we read that there would be no sick people, all the blind and all the deaf and all the lames were all cured because they were all perfect, just like the ultimate goal. There was no doubt about God. Some people say, if Mashiach comes, how do you know? How do I know? Maybe I don't believe it. And I always say to him, if you don't believe in the Mashiach, then I won't believe him either. There is no such thing as Mashiach being accepted or forced to be accepted or accepted by few. It has to be accepted clearly, like the sun. Is no doubt about the power of the sun or the achievement or the existence of the sun. That's the way it happens on the giving of the Torah. That's why there is no copying. No other religion have an event where the entire nation stood and was able to walk through a model home. That's the idea of the giving of the Torah. That's why it cannot be repeated, because it had to have been done one time, and that's when we enter into a covenant that we will work towards building a home for God. And he had revealed himself in a way that he says, that's the way I want to be when the ultimate time comes. That explains, as I said, there are many other points that the Rebbe is going to address, all points that can be derived from. We are told that when God came down Mount Sinai, immediately after he gave 10 commandments, he turned to Moshe and says, go up with me to study the rest of the Torah. And how many days Moshe was on Mount Sinai? 40 days and 40 nights, right? It's in the text. How many times did he stay there for 40 days? 3 times. The second time he was begging. God told them, Salachti kidvarecha, and then he says, go down, come back with a new set of stones and I'll write them. So he was there 3 times. 120 days. The Talmud, based on Medrash, tells us that when Moshe went up, the angels were very unhappy. And they turned to Moshe, to turn to God. First, they tried to intimidate Moshe. It's in the Medrash. So God says to Moshe, don't worry, hold on to my chariot, to my chair, and they will not hurt you. But there's a whole points that be made, but that's not, I want to talk about one point. The angels turn to God and say, the Torah will be better served for the Torah's sake up in heaven by angels, because we have no evil inclination. All we do is study Torah. The Torah is like a minefield of treasures. The deeper you delve, the greater the treasures. No one can ever say that they studied the entire Torah, because the more you dive in, the more. And I showed with you an example. I'm not a great scholar by all means, but I studied the Torah portion every week for all my life. Every week, the year comes back and I study the same Torah portion, I discover new teachings. I discover much deeper understandings, the same text that I know by heart, because there is something about the Torah. There is no other book that can be compared to. The Torah is able to endless treasures to be brought up. So the angels turn to God and they say that they deserve the Torah because they will be able to extract much more than humans, because they can sit and study continuously for years without interruption. They don't go to the bathroom, they don't need a rest, and don't have a mother and father who needs their help. And God turned to Moshe and he says, give them an answer. And Moshe, answer them. And Moshe turned to the angel and he says, can you tell me what it reads in the Ten Commandments? And he said, yes. Are you familiar with the Ten Commandments? And they said, yes. Well, it says the fifth commandment is honor thy father and mother. Do you have a father and mother? They said, no. So he said, so what are you talking about? It says, thou shalt not steal. Are there any objects up in heaven that you can steal? They said, no. Thou shalt not murder. Do you have any ability to kill? They said, no. So he said, therefore, the Torah don't belong to you. This is the Medrash. Harry, you heard that Medrash before? It's a very famous Medrash. I have shared different interpretations over the years. Very, very beautiful interpretation about the exchange. Here, in this context, the explanation is as follows. What Moshe turned to the angels is that God gave the Torah in a mundane, coarse place, because that's the ultimate goal, to reveal himself in the tachtonim, in the lowest level possible. And if you keep the Torah, you won't be able to serve God. And therefore, the commandments do not apply to you. That's what Moshe is turning to the angels. And therefore, they had no choice but to admit. He also, another explanation was that their dispute was who should have the final ruling about disputes. Part of the Torah is that there is continuous disputes. There is always disputes. Everything. There is a dispute on everything. If there is no dispute, you question it. There are some times that the heavenly court, the angels, rule in one way, and Moshe and the earthly court rule differently. And the dispute was who owns the Torah? Who should be able to make the final ruling? And Moshe turns to him and says, you have no connection to the Torah on its most base, simple level. You have a much deeper understanding of the Torah, farther than any human being. You can reach the depth of God's desire, will, in the Torah more than any human being. But in the simple level of honor thy father and mother, you have no idea what it is. Therefore, you have no right to rule in any question of the Torah. And that's why they agree. They can study Torah. The dispute wasn't who is going to have exclusivity to Torah because they study Torah, we study Torah. The dispute was who is going to make the ruling. And the ruling is, Lo b'shamayim hi. It's not in heaven, it's here on earth. God chose to come down here, and God gave the Torah in a simplest terms for human beings who have evil desire and want to and are being challenged always to serve God, and therefore they own the Torah in a way that they can decide what's God desire. What did God meant when when he said a statement in the Torah? Does it mean one way or the other? Human beings rule it, and not in heaven. That explains as we begin to read the text. I just want to make one more point. That's why when you have people going out to war, in the book of Deuteronomy, there is specific instructions about who should be drafted. All young men are getting drafted to the war. But then the priest, an appointed priest to lead the soldiers, stand up and he speaks to the people. Among his statements is, anyone who planted a vineyard and did not reap the grapes, anyone who planted a field of olives, anyone who built a home and did not have the chance to dedicate it, meaning to move in, should return back home, has the ability to return back home. Anyone who got married within 12 months should return back home. And then you would say anyone who feared the war because he does not feel that God will protect them, perhaps he did not serve God properly, they can all return back, and they have the ability to return home. What's such a big deal about building a home and dedicating it, or planting a vineyard and not? Says the commentators explain that when someone is planting a vineyard, they put so much effort and so much hard work just for the final part, which is to be able to harvest it. So when you take someone and say, go to war, and the vineyard, the grapes are all ripened or about to be ripened, and he will not be able to harvest it, the pain and suffering is not temporarily for the days he's out from his home, but all the last 3 years of putting together that vineyard, or 4 years actually, and it's so painful that the Torah says he does not deserve to suffer so much. The same is about building a home. The Gemara says anyone who wants to lose his life short, to live shorter, should build his own home. The Gemara says that building a home shortens a person's life. Today, now day and age, we know why. Because of the permits and the changes and the increase in price, and the subcontract did not show up, and he did it differently, and he forgot about this. We had once an architect, did I tell you about applying for a permit for a synagogue in a house? He forgot to put the AC. He forgot to put the AC. So he was, I wouldn't say a lousy architect. He was a very well-known architect in town. And the county inspectors, they passed it through. It was only discovered when the builder, one of the subcontractors said to the builder, where will you, they look at the drawings. He said, where are you putting the AC? He says, oh gosh. And in Florida, you cannot get a CO without an air conditioning. It's not like New York that it's optional. We had to take a closet and dedicate that was for that closet and change it into AC. But it was done much later in the game. And the reason is building a home is extremely painful process. Anyone who tells you they love it and they enjoy it because it's very creative, it's all good and fine, and it's true. But the Gemara tells us anyone who wants to mitmasken meaning put his life in danger, or in layman terminology, shorten his life, should get busy building his own home. And therefore, that's why it's it's a lot less expensive to buy a ready home, right, than building. That's why, so therefore, we see from here, the point I'm making is that the end goal, the ultimate goal, is so crucial that everything that was up to this point is only a mere preparation. Therefore, the entire 6,000 years of the universe, like 6 days of the creation, are for the Shabbat, for the ultimate day of rest, where we have an extra soul and God reveals himself, where there will be no animosity, no element. Now we're ready to study. Any question? I've been talking too long and I don't like it.
Keep on going.
Surprise.
That's the way we understand things. Right?
I agree.
Of course. How long have you been married?
Almost 44. 44.
My hat off to you.
You didn't take your hat off, Rabbi.
I just received today a new hat, so.
What page are we on?
I believe we are page 494, but afterwards. And I really want to finish the chapter today. No, maybe I was, I went too far. No.
We're on here.
It is page 491. It is known. Harry, which one do you have? It is known. So I'm reading page 491. It is known that the Messianic era, especially the period after the resurrection of the dead, is indeed the ultimate purpose and the fulfillment of the creation of this world. It is for this purpose that this world was originally created. So everything is leading towards Shabbat, towards the ultimate, the resurrection and revival of the dead and God's revelation in this universe. The rabbi add in an extra, at first glance, this statement appears strange. One would have thought that the Messianic era represents not the purpose of creation, but the reward for men's efforts towards fulfilling that purpose. Maybe Messianic era is just to reward us for all the hard toil and hard labor. The Alter Rebbe therefore clarifies, the time of receiving the reward is essentially in the 7th millennium, as is stated in the Kutei Torah of the Arizal, as the Arizal writes, whereas the period until then constitutes the fulfillment of the world's purpose. The Arizal says that in the 7th millennia, Shabbat, in about less than 200, a little more than 200 years from now, is the time, and we know that Shabbat starts at sunset, a little earlier from the, so it can happen every moment. The reward will be in the 7th millennia, but the resurrection of the dead will happen just before. A glimmer of this revelation, remember I told you about a model home? A glimmer of this revelation, which will take place in the future, has already been experienced at the time of the giving of the Torah at Sinai. As it is written, there are verses relating to the giving of the Torah where God revealed himself in a way that their souls lost their bodies. Right, Harry? It's very famous. There was revival of the dead. They all died. What happened? Their soul departed their bodies, and God returned back. How did he return back? With dew of Torah. That's what it says, Tal Torah. It's the Torah, the protection that we talked about last lesson. But now the rabbi is telling us it's all a model, a representation of what will happen in the ultimate days. As it is written, you have been shown to know that Lord.
Didn't call you to say happy birthday.
Anybody heard the word ata areita ladat? Every time the Torah is open up, every time we open up the Torah, we say ata areita ladat. What does ata areita ladat? You have shown to know that God is the Lord. These are the words that at the giving of the Torah, and every time on Shabbat or on a weekday. I'm sorry, we don't say that on weekday, only on Shabbat. When we open up the ark, we say that prayer, because now we connect to the Torah. It's a miniature of connection to the Torah at the giving of Mount Sinai. You actually revealed yourself, literally made yourself seen, indicating that the revelation was in a matter perceivable to physical sight. And so it is written, and all the people saw the thunder. They saw that is normally what is normally heard. They saw thunder. Thunder you hear, you don't see. They saw with that which you hear, and they heard that which you see. And as our rabbis explains, they looked eastward and heard the divine speech issuing forth, saying, I am God, you Lord. They looked eastward, they heard God speaking the Ten Commandments. And so too, turning towards the 4 points of the compass, and above and below, they heard the words coming from every direction, a stereo sound, surround sound, was not something new that Thomas Edison or somebody, or Bose or Bose or Sony created. At the giving of the Torah, they had surround sound. They heard God speak from all corners and above and below, because God reverberated every part of the creation, and therefore anywhere they turned, they heard God. As explained also in Tikkun Zohar, there was no place from which he did not speak to them. God spoke to the Jewish people and made a covenant for more everywhere. This was so because in the Ten Commandments his blessed will was revealed. Since the Ten Commandments, comprise the entire Torah, which represents the inner aspects of his will and wisdom, where there is no concealment of the countenance whatsoever. As we say in our prayers, for in the light of your countenance, you gave us a Torah of life. In other words, God revealed himself. It's like a model home, miniature of what it will happen at the time of the resurrection of the dead. The Torah thus represents the light of his countenance, that is, the inner light of godliness. When this light was revealed through the uttering of the Ten Commandments, the entire world experienced a revelation of godliness. And we read about the other nations turning around, trembling. They turned to Balaam and said, Hashem misinai ba. They said, what happened? The world is coming to an end. And he says, come down. God come from Mount Sinai to give the Torah and made a covenant with the Jewish people. Anybody heard about that conversation? Harry, you heard that, right? It's a very famous discussion in the Talmud that's brought up many times, that all the nations trembled when God came down on Mount Sinai because the impact was on the entire universe. Just like when Mashiach will arrive and the resurrection will affect every part of the creation. Not Jewish people. The entire creation will come to the ultimate goal that is intended when God created it, and therefore everything will change. Therefore, the Jews who stood at Sinai, were nullified out of existence. As our sages have said, at every divine utterance, their soul took flight from their body. Right? And they turned to Moshe and says, you speak to us, we cannot hear God's words. And God says, I agree. And he spoke to Moshe the other 8 commandments. They heard only the first 2 commandments. But doing those two commandments, every word caused their soul to depart their body, because it could not be contained in their body. The experience was too powerful for the soul to remain in the body. But God restored it to them with the dew with which he will revive the dead in the world to come. God revived them back, brought back the soul to the body, just like as he will do when the resurrection will take place. This is the dew of Torah, which is called might. That is, the Torah provides the strength that enable us to receive divine revelation without dissolving out of existence. As explained above in reference to the reward of tzaddikim in the world to come, we spoke about the power of Torah to protect against the revelation of godliness, and God used the dew of Torah to revive them back. Similarly, our sages remark Whoever engages in the study of Torah, the dew of Torah will revive him. He gets revived by the dew of the Torah. The Torah is variously described as dew, rain, and so on, each figure denoting a different level within it. From the statement just paraphrased, we learn that dew refers to the Torah's restorative power, and it was this dew by which God restored the souls of the Jews, which has taken flight upon experiencing a degree of divine revelation foreshadowing that of the Messianic era. But afterwards, after there is a revelation of the Mount Sinai, after the Torah was given, their sin caused both them and the world to become gross again until the end of days, when God's right hand, Yamin, that is his power will be revealed. Then the dross of the body and of the world will be refined, and they will be able to receive the revelation of God's light that will shine forth over Israel by means of the Torah, which is called might. We're not going to talk about the Itaruta de Leila, Itaruta de Latata, but all we're going to say is that when God came down, he gave us a miniature of resurrection, but it didn't last. As soon as God departed, within a few days, 40 days later, they worship idols. They cheated on God. Who did not have enough strength. And that created a major darkness into the universe. God is waiting for us to reach that level. Now, God came down, and this did not affect the Jewish people. God wants us to ascend up high, and that's when he will resurrect the dead and bring Mashiach. And that's when we serve God by studying Torah and doing the mitzvot. Then, I'm sorry, through the superabundance of light, which will shine upon the Jewish people, the darkness of the nations will also be lit up. The rabbi is saying that it will affect even the other nations of the universe. They will be cleansed, they will receive the light, and therefore will become better people, kinder people, connecting to God. As it is written, I believe in Isaiah 60, chapter 60, verse 3, and nation will walk by you, the Jewish people's light. In other words, it's not going to just the Jewish people, it will affect every part of creation, beginning with rocks, as the prophet, I believe, or the Medrash tells us, Even Mikir Tizak. Actually, it's a prophet. The rocks will speak up and say, why did you step on me if you did not serve God? Who gave you permission to use me? Rocks, inanimate objects, will turn to a person and speak and connect. The vegetable kingdom will turn to God and serve God. And in this way, there will be no weeds to weed out. You plant a tree, you will benefit from the tree, not the fruits. After the sin of Adam and Eve, the taste or the nutrients of trees is moved into the fruit, Prior, et pri ose pri lemino. If you read the description in the creation, the trees themselves provided the nutrients. The food themselves, the trees themselves were beneficial for man. When they talk about in history domesticating trees, I've read about how long ago they domesticated tomatoes, how long ago they domesticated apples. I am saying when God created the universe, apple tree, you didn't eat the apple. You can eat the leaves and the bark. That's where you get all the nutrition. That's where you get all the benefits. When Mashiach will come, the trees will turn back to the original plan and will provide us abundance of good and nutrients from the bark, not just the fruits. So that's the vegetation universe. And then you will have the animal kingdom. They will be subservient to man, and they will serve God only. And then you'll have the human kingdom. Men, women, Jews, and non-Jews will be turning to God and serving God. I want to finish today, and we're about to finish. And it is also written that the nations will say to the Jewish people, house of Jacob, go, and we will walk along by the light of God. They will, we say it every morning in prayer, Beit Yaakov lechu v'nelcha. They turn to the house of Jacob and say, go to Jerusalem to bring sacrifice. We want to join you. I will buy you a first-class ticket. Just take me with you. I want to be there, but I don't want to be a stranger. And we will be able to accept their gift, their offer, and travel with them. By the way, it's another point where you do not, anybody who's been to the JLI, talking about converts, there is no need for a non-Jew to convert, to connect to God. All they need is to serve God with the 7 laws of Noah, and they will be rewarded by resurrected in the world to come. And they'll turn to a Jew and say, take us with you to Jerusalem to see how God reveals himself in the Holy Temple. And again, we read, I believe this one is said by Isaiah. He's talking about the end of days. Isaiah said, and the glory of God shall be revealed, and all flesh will see godliness. What do you mean all flesh? All Israelites. He speaks to the Jewish people. All flesh refer to Jews and non-Jews alike. And to enter the holes of the rocks and the clefts of the boulders for fear of God and of his majestic glory. And this is again, Isaiah talks about the Messianic era, where those who did not serve God will find nooks and crannies to hide, to place to hide from the glory of God. And that refers to Jews and non-Jews alike. This refers to the nations who will be filled with the dread of God, for it cannot be said of Israel, who will be one with God, that they will seek refuge from him. So also do we pray, appear in the majestic splendor of your might over all the inhabitants of the world, including the other nations. We say it in Yom Kippur. We turn to God and says, please reveal yourself with your majestic glory in front of the entire universe. Not referring to the Jewish people, but the entire universe, including non-Jewish. Thus we see that in the Messianic era, godliness will be revealed to all the nations of the world, and in this state lies the fulfillment of the purpose for which the world was created. So now we know, A, what is closer or farther from God? B, why God desires to create all the spiritual worlds, because they are stepping stones, like a plan where you hire different employees, different contractors to achieve the completeness of the house. And the last one, why God wants this universe, why God created this universe? Simply because his desire is to reveal himself only here. So at the time of the resurrection of the dead, the ultimate of the project will happen here in this universe with physical bodies. And therefore, the closer we get, the better off we are. So every time we do a mitzvah, as Rambam writes, always figure that there is an even scale. And one mitzvah can tilt the scale down towards positive and bring Mashiach. So it can be one extra mitzvah that can bring Mashiach. One extra study of Torah will bring Mashiach. Next week, next chapter 36, I'm sorry, chapter we just completed 36. Next chapter 37, the rabbi will talk about the purpose of me serving God here on earth only, and not serving God elsewhere. And I thank you very much for being good students.
Thank you.
And we'll conclude now.